Gee, this summit was full of fear and loathing, I've got to say. Warnings about how climate change is already claiming lives and increasing the damage bill because of more extreme natural disasters. What's your reply to that long list of doomsayers who turned up to tell us that?
So, Chris, it's very important to recognize that there's constantly catastrophes. I mean, there's been catastrophes all through history. And so it's very easy to show the next catastrophe and claim that's because of global warming. Now, global warming is real, and it's very likely that it does have an impact. But what you need to recognize is that because we're richer, more resilient, we've dramatically droned down the number of people that actually die from climate-related disasters. If you look at the statistics, and we have statistics for the last 100 years, in the 1920s, on average, people died from droughts, floods, storms, wildfires, and extreme temperatures, about 500,000 people each year. And since then, I can see you're actually showing this on the screen.
Yes.
Since then, it's gone down dramatically, so that now it's down to about 7,000 people that die every year. It is likely that some of these people actually die because of climate-related disasters, but it is incredibly important to recognize that our ability to deal with this is dramatically higher. We've actually seen a reduction of almost 99% in death in death over the last 100 years. And of course, at the same time, populations have quadrupled. So we've actually seen a decline of 99.7% or thereabouts. That's a story you don't hear.
And because of our, well, overpopulation in some continents and larger populations, we're also obviously having a higher damage bill because there are more of us with homes in the bush, more of us with homes on the sea and on rivers that flood and where there are bushfires.
Yes. So when people tell you there's higher cost of damage from climate, they're absolutely right. They're higher costs, but that's because we're richer. When you have more wealth, when you have more houses, when each house is worth more, then obviously you will get higher damages from the same storm or the same flood. If you correct for that, and we have good evidence for this, unfortunately only back to about 1990, we've seen a decline in the total cost globally from about 0.26% of GDP to down to 0.18%. It's not increasing, it's slightly decreasing. And again, it's because we're technologically much better at dealing with these problems.
Technology. This is a good segue into my next question. You've always claimed to me that technological innovation, that green energy research will improve our lot and will handle any rise in temperature. Are you supportive of what you're hearing from our own Prime Minister? Because it's a debate talking about things we don't know of, so it's hard to press the point home.
It's absolutely hard to tell people, look, the evidence tells us that we become better and better at handling problems. It seems very unlikely that that would suddenly stop and that we wouldn't be able to do this. The second point, I think, to recognize is you are not going to solve current climate policy with current technology. We know that even on current paths of better technology, we know that the cost of going net zero for the US, it's a new study in Nature magazine, tells us this will cost each and every American by 2050 $11,300 every year. There's no way the average American is going to allow that sort of cost. You're not going to be able to go to net zero without dramatically new innovation. But if we innovated a new technology that was cheaper than fossil fuels, everyone would switch. The Chinese, the Indians, not just rich, well-meaning Australians, but everyone would switch. And so the real point here is to recognize not only is technology what saves most of us, but it's also what's going to solve global warming. But we need to invest a lot more in research and development into this green energy. Otherwise, we're not going to get it.
R&D, absolutely. You've said that to me many times, and I think it takes on a whole new meaning now that we've heard from our Prime Minister on this subject. Now, what we've done so far to reduce CO2 is not working either, is it?
No. I love the way that every COP we go and we say, oh, we made all these wonderful new promises. Remember, there's a reason why it's COP26. There's 25 of them before that who've managed to do very little except make a lot of promises. And then, of course, we ditch them later. if you look at the UN Environment Program, they actually did a study of the last decade of climate policy. And what they found was something I think should be reported from the rooftops. They told us we can't tell the difference between what actually happened and a world where nobody cared about climate since 2005. Remember, this is the decade where we did Paris. This is the decade where everyone talked about climate policy. So there's a lot of promises into the future, but if you look at the actual emissions, we can't tell the difference from a world that didn't care about climate. So yes, lots of applause and lots of people talking about this, but we're not actually moving anywhere. And of course, that's because fossil fuels still power about 81% of the world's economy. And this is what is going to stick for a very long time unless we get better technology.
And we had this big talk fest in Glasgow. We've had a fair few talk fests, Bjorn. And for some reason, we don't have the leader of the biggest emitting nation at the talk fest, which in many ways is as unproductive as you could possibly order.
Well, it also goes to show that this is not predominantly about what rich countries do. You mentioned earlier that this doesn't matter what Australia does. Remember, if the US goes net zero, even if it went net zero today, it would reduce temperatures by the end of the century by 0.16 degrees. If the EU went net zero, it would reduce temperatures about 0.14. If the whole OECD, so that would be Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Canada, the US, Europe, and everyone else, went totally net zero today, it would reduce temperatures by the end of the century by less than half a degree centigrade. It's not nothing. But this is not what's going to drive the global warming in the 21st century. It's China, it's India, it's most of Africa, it's the rest of Southeast Asia and Latin America. And look, most of these countries want to lift their populations out of poverty. They have much bigger priorities. It's not surprising that China is not going to say, sure, we'll go net zero, because it would cost them a fortune. Again, it is unlikely that if we pick a policy that's going to cost more than 11,000 US dollars every year, that most developing countries are going to say, oh, yeah, I want to do that too. No, of course they don't.
No. Bjorn Lomborg, always fascinating to hear your take on all of this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
There you go.